Steelrising is unashamedly developer Spider's take on the Dark Souls style of action RPG. It's a little ugly at times, but it's fun as hell to play. Wildly imbalanced, but full of heart. Over 15 or so hours, which could have gone far longer with all the side quests, I fell deeply in like with a game that is far more than the sum of its parts. It's also Series X and S only, so let's get into it with the XboxEra review of Steelrising. It is the end of 18th century in France, and King Louis XVI is a real jerk. You are Aegis, an automaton and bodyguard to the Queen, Marie Antoinette. She tasks you with finding your creator and trying to put an end to her husband's desperate ploy to keep his power. As Aegis, you will slowly uncover the truth of your creation across a miserable, war-torn France. Bodies line every street as the king's metal army kills anyone that gets in their way to feast on their souls. It's a bleak, weird, and frankly awesome setup for the main story. It's such an absurd version of our world, and it works because it always takes itself just seriously enough to never delve into the realm of just being silly. This is thanks in large part to a solid voice cast who fully commit to their roles. Being an American, the English language version I played featured British accents mixed with perfectly, I think, enunciated French words. It was a bit odd hearing everyone sound like they were from various parts of England until the name of somewhere in France came up and then it would be announced in a French accent. But it worked because of how well read and written the lines were. All of this works in service of a game that is proud of being a Souls-like. While maybe not as egregious as Lies of P, there's also definitely some Bloodborne inspiration here as well. It is an action role-playing title where you lock onto enemies, use the right bumper and trigger for your main attacks. Left trigger is your per weapon special move. X uses the item you have equipped, B is your dodge, A is a jump, and left bumper is eventually a series of 4 different maneuvers that add greatly to both the traversal and the combat. When Aegis is overworked, she begins to overheat, and if you push her too far, she'll enter a fatigued state. All that sounds pretty familiar. The nice change here is that you can choose to press Y and refresh our stamina meter via the active cooling mechanic. This does come at a cost though, as you'll take a large amount of frost debuff. Do this too quickly and you can freeze yourself in place, requiring you to spend stamina to break free from your self-made icy prison. You can also use the module system to counteract how much frost buildup you receive, along with various other build choices. Those range from the basic have more health to situational buffs such as dealing more damage when low health or having a larger parry window when using counterattack weapons. One key area that the game differs is in the quality of life changes that it makes. The pause menu actually pauses the game, and there are a bevy of difficulty options that I'll get into later. From your weapons to your armor, any fan of the Dark Souls series and more recently Elden Ring will feel right at home. Instead of bonfires, you have Vestals. Using one resets all enemies in the area and heals you back to full while refilling your main heal item. Gather enough anima and you can upgrade one of 6 different stats. Every time you upgrade, you'll need a little bit more anima than last time. The love of From Software's template is clear, and I feel like they've pulled much of the best from it, but it's not all well done. Level design is one of the areas that From shines, and the various cities of Paris have a familiar setup. As you progress through each area, you will constantly unlock shortcuts. This is helpful with the game's many and quite necessary if you want things to go well, side quests. One main difference from the Souls games though is that you cannot fast travel to and from each Vestal. Instead, you'll have a horseless carriage in each city that is your only means of traveling between them. This did lead to a lot of backtracking, and the level design can make it pretty damn confusing when trying to figure out the proper path to your objective. Though that is another major change from the Souls titles as well. You can purchase an equipable compass, and whenever you activate it, you get waypoints that lead you to your main quest and side objectives. Even with these waypoints though, it can still be far too difficult at times to figure out your way through the city, with obtuse pathways being the only way you can reach certain goals. One thing both in and not really in the game's favor is how easy it is, because you can just run by everything. While it helps keep down the frustration, by the time I had reached the game's final level, I ended up skipping every single non-boss combat encounter because I wasn't worried about leveling up anymore. You can just run by everything, especially if you invest into your stamina equivalent stat. The lack of balance seeps into almost every part of the game outside of its actual weapons-based combat system. I was able to defeat the last 3 main bosses by using a handful of the 100 improved explosive grenades that I had purchased from the Vestal vendor. I took out the final boss in 30 seconds simply by pressing the X button repeatedly and lofting bomb after bomb into his feet. If you choose to play things correctly though, the combat is damned fun. I ended up going with an agility and counter-based setup. My claw weapons gave a satisfying combo and could quickly fill the stun meter on foes. Once that meter was full, enemies are left in a daze and you're able to knock them down with a big attack. There are a lot of weapons in the game, and many are tied to 3 different elements, those being fire, ice, and electricity. I'm unsure if a Day 1 patch is going to tighten things up difficulty-wise, but I hope it does, because when you engage with the game's combat system, it feels great. The dodge and ability to jump make things feel more Elden Ring or Sekiro-like, though with copious amounts of old-school jank mixed in. From games have never really been pixel perfect, but it's clear that the dodge here is very generous with its invincibility frames. Many times it looked like I should have been hit, yet I came away unscathed. Though there were plenty of attacks I was sure I had dodged, yet the game decided I didn't. A lot of this is due to the animations, I'd imagine. They're very good at times, but they can feel off or they're just too fast. The game has 2 graphical options available, a high-resolution 30fps mode and a lower settings 60fps one. The 30fps mode feels terrible, and I couldn't play in it for over a minute before getting a headache. The 60 frames per second mode felt rather stable, though some big boss fight intros did give noticeable dips. Steelrising isn't always the prettiest game, but it has a great art style that I grew to really love. At the start of the game, you get to customize your character and the choices are nicely varied. Sadly, there is no co-op in the game, but you will see your character a ton in the many cutscenes during it. Aegis's model in general looks real good, though the humans you encounter would probably be more at home in the Xbox One generation, despite this being a series-only title. While they do look better in quality mode, I just can't recommend playing in that, as the gameplay itself is way too hardly affected. The performance mode does lead to a lot of environmental pop-in as well, though I stopped noticing it really after a short while. The game's environments don't vary a ton, but the city areas and their art style are gorgeous, despite any technical shortcomings. I love the look, even if the actual layout ends up being rather boxy and stifling at times. Attack animations can look great, though enemy attacks aren't always the easiest to read, and the camera did get stuck a fair bit on the environment in tight quarters. One area that is top-notch though is the soundtrack. It's bloody gorgeous, and I found myself sitting at the main menu theme, listening as it rotates through different songs while I work on other things. It feels appropriate in a way to this weird alt-history English accented revolutionary France, somehow. And finally, we have the accessibility options, which are great to see in a game like this. They will disable a few difficulty-related achievements, and I believe the new Plus mode, which appears to be an upcoming DLC. You get various options that range from lowering enemy damage taken by 25, 50, 75 to 100%, or having the various combat mechanics automated for you. It is great to see, though be warned that once you activate it, it will disable those achievements in New Game Plus modes for that particular run. In conclusion, Steelrising is a mix of decent to damned good parts that takes the Souls-like action RPG and puts it into one of the most ridiculous and awesome settings I've seen in a while. Mediocre graphics are countered by a fantastic art style, fun combat, incredible music, and a story that I found myself deeply invested in. If you've got an itch for the genre and don't want to wait for something like Lies of P, then Steelrising is an excellent alternative to hold you over. Thank you so much for watching, and if you can like, comment, and subscribe, it is by far the best way to help the channel grow. We'll see you here next time on XboxEra.